In the late 15th century, when the first Europeans landed in the New World, stories of the indigenous peoples who inhabited the lands were quickly penned and spread, creating interior depictions that would influence the way white individuals viewed and interacted with these native groups, practicing very unfamiliar and brutal traditions of torture. These traditions of violence towards criminals and prisoners of tribal conflict was deeply engraved into the culture of some of these more vicious tribes. In North America, beginning in the mid-17th century and continuing through the 19th century, captivity narratives made up a decent portion of these stories, grabbing the attention of colonists, and later settlers that were eager to expand throughout the entire continent. You might have heard of the Apaches, as they are often featured in movies. However, among the many tribes, there was a particularly powerful and large Native American nation called the Comanches. The Comanches were feared for their cruelty, annihilation, and their assaults on men, women, and children. They often take the scalps of their female captives as trophies. Join us today as we uncover the brutal realities of the unspeakable thing the Apache did to their captives. Who were the Apache? The Apache are a Native American tribe with a long and complicated history that dates back thousands of years. They have been accustomed to the area for thousands of years and are thought to have originated in what is now Mexico and the southwest of the United States. Spanish explorers from the 16th century provide one of the earliest reports of Europeans coming into contact with the Apache. The two major bands in the area at the time, the Apache of the South and the Apache of the interior, were the names they gave the tribe. Known for their warrior culture and fierce independence, the Apache were expert hunter-gatherers who engaged in agriculture by cultivating crops such as corn, beans, and squash. The Apache lived in small nomadic bands prior to European immigrants, subsisting on hunting, gathering, and more recently, agricultural abilities. But this was only one aspect of the Apache's abilities. They were well known for their exceptional fighting abilities, especially their skillful use of horses in mounted battle. The Apache were among the last tribes to successfully stave off European invasion, in part because of this dot. The tribe was blessed with a multi-layered and intricate social structure, with various bands and sub-tribes, each with its own leaders and traditions. The Apache, like many of their Native American colleagues, had a strong bond with the earth and the natural world, and believed in a diverse range of spirits and deities. The specific treatment of the European immigrants varied depending on the native tribe's culture in North America. The Native American people had long-standing traditions and customs for dealing with prisoners before the British colonists arrived. Whether captives were enslaved, punished, slain, or integrated into the tribe depended completely on the locality. Depending on whatever tribe was visited, Native American tribes' typical treatment of European colonists could range from brutality to tenderness. Apache warriors. For many, the Apache were just the Southwest's most vicious warriors. The Jicarilla, Mescalero, and Chiricahua were some of the most infamous. The Apache would fight anyone who invaded their area, whether it was European settlers or other tribes. Their offensive strategies would always involve raids and ambushes in an effort to surprise and overwhelm their adversary. Since the Apache were a native tribe coping with foreign invasions, they frequently assimilated captive foes, especially women and children. Even if they weren't the only ones doing this, the Apaches would try to grow their tribe by imparting fresh information and abilities to these newcomers. However, like to many Native American tribes, there were many incidents of punishing and executing prisoners, as well as violent acts against opponents. Distinct territories, tribes, and methods of treatment. There were two approaches to handling prisoners in the eastern portion of the United States, which extended to southern Quebec and Ontario: adoption by the tribe or punishment through execution. Adoption may seem like an odd kind of punishment, and although it isn't as harsh as people think, it nevertheless severely disrupts the person's life and sense of independence. The identity and social standing of a deceased member of the capturing tribe would be provided to the captive in question. Interestingly, These tribes typically choose adoption for captive children and adolescents. Tribes on the northwest coast were much more likely to enslave anyone captured during a war than tribes on the rest of the continent. Tribes traded slaves with one another as a valued commodity. At Native American potluck ceremonies, gifts of enslaved captives may be given, which would only benefit the giver. The question of whether or not slaves made up a significant fraction of the population along the northwest coasts and an entire social class is still up for debate. However, Native Americans were regarded as prisoners in ways other than captivity and adoption. The treatment of mature people and teenage males differed greatly. The brutal Apache leader. Geronimo was arguably the most well-known Apache leader. Although the name means the one who yawns, Geronimo was a key player in the Apache-United States conflict. Geronimo led the native campaign of resistance during the Apache Wars, a protracted and drawn-out struggle that would endure from 1849 to 1924. Apache tribes were evicted from their ancestral lands and sent to reservations, many of which were not on traditional Apache territory after the Indian Removal Act of 1830. Remarkably, Geronimo fought against U.S. government soldiers and Mexican forces for invading Native American territories. 400 Mexican soldiers attacked Geronimo's camp at the massacre at Llanos in 1851, killing his mother, wife, and kids. The moniker Geronimo is said to have earned notoriety for his audacious retaliatory measures against the Mexican army. Legend has it that he used just a knife to attack Mexican soldiers who were firing at him. In order to defend Native American territory, Geronimo and his supporters would escape reservations 3 times during the fight in 1878, 1881, and 1885. But the violent conflicts between the Apache, Mexican troops, and U.S. settlers would eventually come to an end. U.S. forces would capture Geronimo in 1886, thereby ending the Apache Wars for most of the population. Even though Geronimo and his 16 followers massacred more than 500 Mexicans in the final 6 months of his military career, their campaign would ultimately result in their capitulation to U.S. forces. Geronimo would become famous in a number of fairs and shows, most notably a parade at President Theodore Roosevelt's second inauguration, before ending his life as a prisoner of war in 1909. Captives under the Koch prisoners from Native American tribes were punished during the American Indian Wars. This punishment was ceremonial and meant to result in death. It typically included sacrificial offerings made in honor of the sun. If a Native American was captured by another tribe, it was a chance for them to be as careful as possible. To demonstrate the utmost degree of defiance, a Native American in captivity would have to sing death songs and brag about their war history. The public punishment was usually given in the captor's village, and people of all ages may watch and participate. Burning the prisoner, one hot coal at a time rather than on a fuel pyre, was a popular method of punishment. There were frequent beatings. Native American hostage treatment is rife with references to punishing a captive while they were still alive. As Part 752 of the prolonged agony, it would not be unusual for the victim to sustain broken fingers or worse. John Ratcliffe, the colony's second president, would provide a graphic illustration of Native American retribution. Ratcliffe had been burned alive after being skinned from head to toe. Over time, punishment. It's a little harder to go into depth about one recurrent feature of Native American punishment here. Assume that a sensitive area of male captives received special attention, and in order to maximize agony, this punishment would be administered gradually and succinctly. The design included punishment as a long-lasting developing event and ritual that would take place over a long period of time. Captives who had fainted would be revived by Native Americans, who would also provide them with food and water to prolong the punishment. Native American punishment was based on a methodology. First Nation members mention caressing captives, which means that the initial punishment consisted solely of causing agony without causing serious physical harm. This usually starts with the lower limbs and moves up to the arms and torso. Because of this, it can take several days and nights for the ceremony to be performed.